Are you sick and tired of the same old Ninja 400s and R3s as your beginner bike options? Do you want something a little more interesting, maybe eclectic even? Something your buddies will ask about when you roll up in a bike night? Me too, honestly. We've made so many beginner bike videos that I can tell you off the top of my head what the best modern beginner bikes are without even blinking. Sure, you might have a bunch of options nowadays, but they tend to be the same variations on small displacement parallel twin sport bikes or muted feeling 650s with lower build quality to fit a budget. Today, I've gone back in the catalog and dug up 7 beginner bikes that basically anyone could start on from a wide range of styles that are often left out when people talk about a good beginner bike. The best part is that all these bikes can be had for around $5,000 or less, a lot less in some cases. Unfortunately, that does mean that they're all used, so you rich boys out there looking to drop money on a showroom shiny motorcycle might find yourself a little disappointed, but honestly, you shouldn't be starting on a brand new bike anyways. Seriously, just kind of a bad idea. The only people who start on brand new bikes are Ducatistas who buy a brand new V2 or a V4 as their beginner bike, ride it 2 or 3 times, then list it on Craigslist for $1,000 off the purchase price with the tag, I don't have time to ride it anymore. Don't worry, we all know you got scared and desperately need to unbury yourself from a massive financial burden. You can admit it. Now, let's get started with perhaps the least impressive bike on this list, but the cheapest by far, the Buell Blast. Yes, the wretched little Buell Blast. Back when Harley-Davidson wasn't just selling 10 motorcycles with the same V-twin engine in it, they had this little wing making sport bikes and naked bikes. They also had a beginner bike in the form of the Buell Blast. I'm just going to come out and say it, I don't like the looks of this motorcycle. I think it's an ugly bike, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a solid choice for a beginner bike. It's packing a 492cc air-cooled single-sill putting down 34 horsepower and 30 foot-pounds of torque. Yeah, it's not the fastest bike out there, but thanks to it being a thumper, you've got decent little smack of torque down low. And that was because it was air-cooled. With only one cylinder, the bike was crazy lightweight and only 360 pounds dry. Wet and ready to ride, you're looking at closer to 380 or 390, but that's still super manageable for just about anybody. Crucially, it has a low seat height at 27.5 inches and a low center of gravity thanks to its low slung exhaust, making it harder to drop at a stoplight. Even if you do drop it, who cares? It's a used bike from the early 2000s that was literally designed to be abused, dropped, and learned on. So much so that until recently, Harley actually used the Blast as their Riders Academy motorcycle. You can pick these bikes up dirt cheap. When we were looking at them as a rival bike for the Gixxer 250 back in March and April, we saw super clean examples going as low as $1,500. Don't expect the Blast to be the last bike you ride or for the rest of your life, but as a beginner bike that you pick up, learn on, and drop on a few times, this is a perfect choice. Speaking of perfect choices, do you know the best choice in ball shavers is? That's right, Manscaped, baby! They make the best ball shavers in the world, and that's right, I said it, the whole world! It's not some low-brow piece of crap that's gonna nick your junk and leave you standing in a puddle of ballsack blood wondering where your life went so wrong. It'll shave your nuts in seconds. Not just your nuts either, your chest, your armpits, anywhere you've got hair, the Lawnmower 4.0 is there. It's always there, watching you, waiting to shave you. It's underneath your bed and it attacks you in deep in the middle of the night. It's got a longer battery life, wireless charging, new trimmer guards, and more. But that's not all. If you call right now, there's no number. Anyways, if you click the link down below, you'll get 20% off your order on the Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker, the Shears 2.0, their ball shavers, whatever else you need, they've got it on the cheap. Big shout out to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Now go shave your testicles, you ape. Also, if this is the first time you're watching one of my videos and you're seeing me yell about ball shavers, God bless you. But how about something with a little more oomph? The KTM Duke 690. Going from a baby single cylinder to a big one, the Duke 690 features the LC4 motor, which is a 654cc liquid-cooled single, putting down 65 horsepower and 48 pounds-foot of torgos. Again, like the Buell, it's got a very low weight because KTM really only wants to make dirt bikes, and so every one of their bikes is made using only the lightest weight things possible, including lots of zip ties. I'm not kidding. Take a look at a KTM and see how many times they forego fastening wires down to the frame with zip ties. But regardless, the Duke 690 is an agile bike that produces more than enough power to have fun with and can be had on the cheap. There's 2 issues that I need to mention when it comes to the Dukes. First, it's butt ugly. This was way back before KTM knew what they wanted their motorcycles to look like, i.e. weird bug alien things, so they sort of just threw together a street bike with whatever they had lying around on the factory floor. Secondly, the early LC4 engine is entirely unreliable. It had some head gasket issues, leaked oil, had some mechanical gremlins, and more. That being said, the Duke 690s that are available now are the ones that have survived through all those problems, so they're probably okay. You might end up getting a bike with more character than you'd like, but you can be reasonably confident that it'll turn over and run. If you're looking for something a little bit more modern, you could make the case for the Svartpilen 701. The modern LC4 engine is way more reliable, and the way the Svart is geared makes it a little more beginner friendly than something like the 701 Supermoto. You can also find crazy deals on Husky out the door for some reason. It's not unheard of to pay $3,000 off the MSRP. Now how about something sporty? The Yamaha FZ6. It's a classic example of a bulletproof Japanese inline 4 that a responsible rider could hop on and learn with. And added benefit, you too can become one of the FZ6 owners that never shut up in the comment section down below about how much you love your bike. In case you forgot, back in the day when the Big Four made a new 600 or 1000cc sport bike, they made a comfortable naked or half-faired version with the detuned engine for street riding. So if you wanted to be a street Rossi, you could, but they also had motorcycles for normal people. Don't let that fool you though, they were built using the same levels of tech and could do 90% of the things that their fully faired counterparts could. The FZ6 features a 599cc inline 4 putting down 98 horsepower and 46 foot-pounds of torque. Now, settle down my little squidlet, don't think that just because I'm saying that starting on a 100 horsepower inline 4 is possible doesn't mean that any 100 horsepower bike is suddenly fair game. There's a reason I chose this and not a modern bike like the RS660. First of all these old school inline 4s are pretty slow off the line. To give you an idea, the FZ6 doesn't actually make peak power until you get to over 10,000 RPM. If you're a little older and can actually manage to keep the engine a little bit lower in the revs, you can pick this thing up and keep it for a long time because you'll have a ton of room to grow. Now, let's talk tech really briefly. It has none. Oh, that was pretty brief, huh? Yeah, those bikes were produced before the advent of ABS as standard. It doesn't have TC or wheelie control. It's got a cable throttle and an engine. Delicious. If you do go down this route, it's worth taking the bike into a parking lot and practicing to see what it feels like to lock up your rear tire, so that if you encounter a panic stop situation and lock up your rear, which is super easy to do, you don't freak out and release that rear brake in high side. Just one more reason why I really suggest this only to a new rider who's been a bit older and more responsible with their throttle. If you do decide to pick up FZ6s, these bikes can be had used for $3,000 all day long. They will have higher mileage numbers. 25 to 30,000 miles is not uncommon on these bikes, but don't let that scare you. They're bulletproof motors. Number 4 is for the person who needs a motorcycle that will live longer than they will. They want a bike that they can pass down through generations like an oral tradition, a motorcycle that you can run on moonshine and keep lubricated with honey or olive oil from the downfall of man is upon you and you need to start your own tale in the apocalyptic survival, the KLR 650. It doesn't matter what KLR you get, be it one from the 80s or one from the 2010s, they're basically the same bike, even down to the plastic doohickey that breaks in the engine and needs to be replaced. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it. Anyway, the KLR is packing a 651cc thumper, putting down a fire-breathing 41 horsepower and 38 foot-pounds of torque. Yeah, it's not fast, but that's not why you buy a KLR. You buy it because you want to take this mule out to the middle of nowhere with a tent and a sleeping bag buggy corded to the milk crate on the tail. The KLR 650 riders are the physical incarnation of the tortoise from the Tortoise and the Hare story. They might be slow as hell, but they always get to where they're going. Not to mention that when the road gets boring, which it will, you can take it off-road, and if you drop it, you're more likely to damage the earth than the KLR. Since the KLR was basically made the same for decades, there's a bunch of them out there and they're super cheap to get into. The only problem is that they're carbureted, so you've been warned. The KLR 650 is a great choice for any beginner rider who wants an absolutely bulletproof, full-sized, big dual sport kind of bike. Number 5 today is going to go to another off-roady type ADV bike, the BMW G650 GS. Look, I know that there are a lot less than sexy motorcycles on this list, but you couldn't ask for a better starter fuel-injected ADV that can actually go off-road. The G650 is packing a 652cc single, making 48 horsepower and 44 foot-pounds of torgos. As if BMW needed to be any dorkier than the predecessor to the G650, it was actually called the Funduro. I mean, come on BMW, the dad jokes just make themselves at this point. But anyways, the G650 is a sort of ADV bike that, much like the KLR, can basically go wherever you want it to. The nice thing is you don't need to worry about a carb, and praying to Rossi that the humidity and temperature and elevation today means that you only need to crank the bike 3 times to get it to turn over. Will it survive the zombie apocalypse? Probably not, but considering that you can find bikes on super cheap and go out and experience what sliding off-road is like, it's a pretty good choice. It's a shame no one out there is going to listen to me, and instead they're just going to comment Ninja 400 or R3. Thoughts? Number 6, and the last sort of dorky entry, is the VStrom 650. This is the more sport touring ADV than actual off-road ADV. It is basically an SV650 with a windscreen that should tell you all you need to know. If you go with older models, it'll have the same liquid-cooled 645cc V-twin as the Gen 1 SV, which made 66 horsepower and 45 foot-pounds of torque. And if you want a new one, you'll be making closer to 74 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque. The SV650 is such an industry darling and fan favorite that a lot of people forget that the VStrom even exists, which means that you can score these for super cheap, both new and used. Much like the FZ6 though, you will see used VStroms for sale with crazy high miles because the people who own these bikes typically ride them like touring bikes. Thanks to the relaxed ergos and wind protection, you can sit on one of these bikes all day long and still be fresh. Don't let 30,000 miles scare you because it's very difficult to kill an SV650 engine. The only thing that's missing is cruise control. If you want a bike that can get hard bags and a top bag and see what's over the horizon, then the VStrom is a great choice. Now let's wrap things up today with a really sweet motorcycle, one that'll impress your riding buddies and normies alike, the Ducati Monster 696. It's literally the Ducati SV650, which is funny because the SV650 is a Japanese monster, the Ouroboros eating its tail. Anyway, the Monster 696 is a classic air-cooled Desmodromic 696cc V-twin, or L-twinner for being pedantic, putting down 79 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque. It's got the classic monster trellis frame, which makes it even classicer. That's a word now. And to my mind, there's few sounds in motorcycling as iconic as a Desmo V-twin. It also helps that it's a properly sporty motorcycle with twin discs, upside down forks, and an adjustable shock in the rear. People are starting to realize just how much of a classic these things are, so prices are starting to creep up, but you can still find these with relatively low miles for around $5,000. Just make sure that when you go to pay for the bike that the Desmos have already been done. You don't want to incur that expense right after you buy the bike. It's really not cheap. Fact, when I took my desert sled in for the Desmo service, the guy in the service department literally told me to prepare my anus. He was not playing around. Desmos are expensive. Goodbye. Hey! Great seeing you here. Didn't think I'd see you back at the end of another Yammie Noob video. Yes, this video is actually over, but if you hit this link over here, you can keep watching Yammie Noob. Leave me a comment on this one and that one if you don't mind. Let me know if you liked it or hated it, and then maybe we can make the videos better. Keep improving, right?